Thank you, Moderator. You will have heard of the minister who preached the same sermon week after week. Eventually, a session clerk asked him, "Why?" And he replied, "I keep preaching it until you do what is needed." General Trustees chairs feel like that minister. Every year, we say the church has too many buildings, too many of poor quality, and too many in the wrong place. And every year, the Assembly agrees. But over the last 10 years, we've sold 162 churches and halls. Average 16 a year. That's less than 1% of the number of churches we have. The most in any one year was 27 in 2014. Last year, we only sold 14 churches, and 7 of them were in Shetland. So much for grasping the nettle of too many buildings. The Shetland figures, however, show that good presbytery planning makes a difference. So I pray that the Presbytery Mission Planning Act will lead to real pruning and planting. We need to get real. Many people have looked in the mirror over the last 15 months during COVID, and they are facing up to a church with fewer but well-equipped spaces in the right places, and the General Trustees will support them. And we need to support and thank those who have looked after the church's estate, particularly fabric conveners and teams within congregations and presbyteries, particularly over the last year. And we want to thank the trustees' own team who are facing up to the challenges being made to serve the church. I want to thank David Robertson, who is in the hall, for his 18 years as secretary to the trustees, and to wish Barry Miller, as our new chief executive and the team he is building, God's blessing for the future. Since I'm not a commissioner, can I ask the principal clerk to move the report?
Moderator, I so move.
Is it seconded?
Thank you very much. Questions? I do have some names here, and I perhaps remind you, it is questions. It's not long statements followed by a question. So questions, please, from Jared Hay.
Moderator, thank you. Jared Hay, number 10. I'm for my greater many sins, the property convener of Edinburgh Presbytery. Despite, I have several questions on different sections of the report, and I would like to commend the trustees, and Raymond in particular, who's been a visionary in his past life in Glasgow, where he got bathrooms into Glasgow tenements and all the rest of it. But also, as a presbytery convener, I want to thank people like David Robertson and also Brian Waller, who has been unfailing in speedily answering questions and giving guidance in these days of lockdown and home working. I gave Raymond a list of the questions, and I will reiterate them for the Assembly. On section 232, the question is, does the convener envisage that all presbytery buildings officers will be employed centrally and deployed locally, with presbyteries bearing the necessary costs? Then several questions on section 2.5, which is about the historic properties. Historic properties are and could become a greater millstone around the neck of a reduced church organisation. How does the convener envisage the church dealing with historic buildings that can't be disposed of? Are there likely to be opportunities to divest ownership of some to Historic Environment Scotland, and what would that take on our part to achieve that? What might the implications of the new historic portfolio be for tying up funds that might be otherwise used by presbyteries to resource missional building renewals locally? And thinking of how this portfolio could grow quickly in the present circumstances, are there risks to the solvency of the General Trustees from this historic portfolio, knowing how much historic buildings can cost to repair? And then where will the money from the sale of historic buildings go? And final question on section 2.8. Note that the report says that Kirk Sessions have invested in renewables with the assistance of the General Trustees. I know of a congregation looking to replace its boilers in a way that can be prepared for the introduction of hydrogen as a means of energy supply, replacing gas. And this kind of transition will be a major item for the well-equipped places. So looking ahead to replacement energy supply, do the General Trustees have a preferred option for a new supply of energy for city churches, which is my own particular interest, obviously, but feel free to expand for different contexts. Thank you, Moderator.
Thank you much. Convener.
Moderator.
Chairman, rather.
Moderator, there's a lot in there, and I know you were running short of time. Let me deal, first of all, with Presbytery Buildings officers. The principle is there that the Presbytery Buildings officer would be employed centrally but deployed locally, with both the Presbytery and the General Trustees having a supervisory role. Secondly, in terms of historic properties, the church has a real problem. We cannot deny that. We have buildings which we have inherited, which are Category A listed, or may have national or even international importance, but we haven't been able to look after them, and we won't be able to look after them. But the Presbytery Planning Act, the Mission Planning Act, has to start to deal with these buildings as we go through. The question of the historic properties portfolio is actually to deal with buildings where the Presbytery has come to the conclusion that the building is not required and that the actual congregation should be dissolved. At that point in time, that building then transfers to the General Trustees, and we are responsible for moving it somewhere else. And that's the difficult one, because a lot of these buildings will not sell very easily, if at all. And so we need to find ways of working with others. We are looking, for example, at ways in which we might work with other community groups. We have been in discussion with ministers of the Crown, Cabinet Secretary and others about the possibility of these buildings being taken over by the state. And that is unlikely given the present circumstances. So we have to find new ways of doing things. But the aim is to remove them from congregational use at that point in time so that the congregation can get on with mission. We have to find a way of this. And it could be a threat. Everything we do is a risk, and we have to manage that risk. But we can't duck it, because we have to deal with some of these buildings over a period of time. And as for hydrogen, I'd love to discuss hydrogen, because I think it's a good idea.
Thank you. There might be a webinar coming up there. Can I ask Andrea Boyes, please? And will Christine Murdoch stand by?
Thank you, Moderator. Andrea Boyes, 606. Two questions regards the reports. The first one's actually about 2.31, the pilot scheme for the Presbytery Buildings Officer. Just an add-on, I note that half the cost was funded by the General Trustees for this officer. And as we're looking forward to larger presbyteries, I wonder if that was something that the General Trustees were going to ensure could happen across the board, if that was in their plan, which would be very helpful for new presbyteries. I speak from the Highlands and Islands transition team on that. The second is on point 2.821, regards Opus issues and Opus electricity. We've had a great frustration, and I know that you put that in the report, and it's caused no end of anxiety. Indeed, our electricity costs were so much so I wondered whether the people were actually taking a long cable from the church to the rest of the village. Our electricity bill was so much greater when we weren't using the building. I thank the General Trustees for their support in this, and I'm heartened to hear that they will push forward. Can I ask that you push a little harder for us? Thank you.
Chairman.
Thanks, Andrea, for those questions. The question of joint funding on Presbytery Buildings Officer is something we haven't finalised yet. The current one in Aberdeenshire, covering a number of presbyteries, is, of course, a pilot. And part of the reason for calling it a pilot is to test out how it works and how we actually finance these things in future. So, just keep watching this space. As for the Opus story, it's not a good story. And we explain in the report what has happened. Yes, we are pushing as hard as we possibly can, and we'll push even harder as we can.
Thank you. Christine Murdoch, and will Scott Paget please stand by? Justine.
Murdoch, 216. Moderator, I would like to thank the Chair for his report and speech and for the excellent support Robert Lee has given to Gaellochhead Parish Church. I also welcome the updating of legislation to enable us to have well-equipped spaces in the right places. I'd like to ask the Chair, will this include help to delist buildings which are no longer well-equipped or aiding mission and which may well be draining congregations of financial resources that needs to be spent on mission? Thank you, Moderator, and thank you, Chair.
Thank you. First of all, thanks. It's nice to hear that members of staff are getting credit for the work they're doing. Thank you. Delisting is something we are having serious conversations with Historic Environment Scotland about at the present moment. We recognise that delisting is required. And I think there's a number of people in Historic Environment Scotland that also recognise that we need to tackle this. In some ways, Scotland has too many listed buildings per capita, and we need to find ways of being able to remove some of the listing issues so that we can get on with development of buildings.
Thank you. Scott Paget, followed by Alex Shuttleworth.
Thank you, Moderator. Paget 198. Yes, that's my number. Thank the convener for the report. I noticed in the report at 2.7 there was talk of glebes, and at 2.8 there was talks of carbon reduction. And I wondered whether those two things talk to each other. I noted at 2.7.2 the glebes committee were looking at guidance for different future uses which glebe land can be put to upon disposal. But I wondered, in our commitment to carbon reduction and climate change, does glebe land hold a role in, I know Faith Impact Forum in the report talked about planting trees, and I wondered whether those things were being looked at by the glebes committee as part of the reflections. Thank you, Moderator.
Raymond.
Moderator, there's a number of things being looked at by the glebes committee in terms of how you future use these. And certainly the suggestions coming from Faith Impact Forum about trees will be one of the things they will look at. It's very interesting. We had an inquiry this morning from a congregation in the islands asking about the use of glebes for effectively small holdings and for growing things. And so I think, yes, there's a potential here for glebes to come in further into the story as we develop it over a period of time.
Thank you. Alex Shuttleworth, followed by James Jack.
Thank you, Moderator. Shuttleworth 426. The convener will have heard on Saturday the long overdue and very welcome decision to move up the agenda, finding a mechanism for releasing money from the sale of buildings from automatically being placed in fabric funds. Is the convener in a position to give this change the full-throated support which it deserves now and going forward?
I'm afraid the answer, Alex, is no. I'm not able to give it the full throttle support. If I did, it would not be fair on my successors who might have to deal with some of the difficulties of this. I think this is a very complicated issue. It's not nearly as simple as simply taking money from there and putting it to there. Clearly, we are in the business of supporting mission, but we're also in the business of ensuring that there are well-equipped spaces in the right places, and there are many congregations who don't have the resources to ensure that they've got the right place, they're either in the right place or that they have the quality that's needed. And so I think we need to find a balance in this, just how we work this one through in the future. But we are committed to having these conversations, and I look forward to reports in due course, probably next year, as a result of the discussions on Friday and Saturday.
Thank you very much. James Jack, followed by Andy Haddo.
Thank you, moderator. Jim Jack, number 12, former chairman of the General Trustees. I would like to thank the trustees, in particular the Glebes Committee, for their support in our development of our glebe. We have a glebe in the middle of the city, which farming has proved more than difficult to achieve. However, we have used this glebe as a part of our ministry, taking our congregation into the land. We now have a whole community of people gathered from various parts of the parish who are developing our glebe, growing vegetables and fruit, all as volunteers. And we have about 80 people who have been sustained throughout the last year, enabling people to get out and to meet each other and to do work that is worthwhile. And I'd like to thank the glebe. I also think that Raymond Young has been inspirational in his last 4 years as chair of the General Trustees. And I understand that Keith Mason and David Robertson are retiring this past year. They both have given the church long service, a valuable service, and I thank them both, not just from me, but from many in the churches around Edinburgh and beyond.
Thank you. Raymond.
Can I encourage people to find out more about Jim's glebe, because it really is inspirational?
Okay. Thank you. Andy Haddo, please.
Thank you, moderator. Haddo 109. Can I just thank the chair and indeed the General Trustees for their report, and particularly for their support of the building project that we are currently trying to undertake down in Eyemouth. My question really is very straightforward. Does the chair have any advice or aware of how the church could maybe more strongly encourage congregations with large investments or large sums in the Central Fabric Fund to help churches who are working very hard to become the right place and the right space, who do not have those advantages of large sums invested and squirreled away somewhere?
Moderator, the regulations already allow for congregations to resource one another within a presbytery with the permission of the presbytery. I'm hoping that the new larger presbyteries will mean that there's even greater opportunity within that presbytery bounds to be able to share resources, as we are in fact encouraging in the Land Plan Act that we've published.
Thank you. And finally, before we move to the deliverance, Francis Henderson. Francis. Thank you, Francis.
Thank you, moderator. Francis Henderson, number 505. I would just like to take this opportunity on behalf of Shetland Church of Scotland to thank Mr. Young for his very kind remarks about Shetland, and indeed the very brave and difficult process we are going through here at the moment. But we want also to record our particular thanks to David Robertson on his retiral, and to the church solicitor, Anne Steele, who has become almost a personal friend. We have had so much dealings with her, and she is marvellous and tremendously helpful. So I want other presbyteries and parishes to be encouraged that the help is there. It doesn't make it easy, but the support has been super. So thank you.
Thank you, Raymond. Yeah. I mean, I'll move to the deliverance, and I can have, for fast track, I have no requests to... sorry, a point of order from Gordon McRae. Sorry, Gordon, I've just seen this come up. Gordon? I think you need to unmute, Gordon, please.
So if I may ask a question?
I've got a point of order from you, is it?
I had a request for a question and it's not been seen.
Or, it's come up as a point of order. Yeah, sorry. I'll ask you a question then. Yes.
Yeah, sorry. Thank you, moderator. 262, Gordon McRae, Minister of Steps and Parish Church in Glasgow. As part of our wider review, our congregation is looking at our future, and particularly we're worried about our ability to maintain the quality and sustainability of our buildings. And it has been suggested by local parties that our congregation trustees might initiate conversations with other organisations, particularly our local Community Development Trust, to study the feasibility of transferring ownership and stewardship of our church buildings to the community. It is then envisaged that if such a notion took root, the congregation as partner would continue using the building as a base for our worship, ministry and mission, along with other members and groups in our community. Moderator, my question is to the chair, are the trustees mindful to encourage such early conversations? And if we progress, would they offer support and advice during any subsequent negotiation?
Moderator, Gordon McRae gave me some advance notice of this, and I would just like to take a couple of minutes on it, or a minute. The GTs are about supporting presbyteries and congregations to ensure that they're well-equipped spaces in the right places. But this does not necessarily mean ownership of a building. And we're looking at future ways. You, moderator, probably better than anybody else around here, knows what it's like to be a member of a congregation that worships in a building you don't own. Because St Magnus is owned by the people of Orkney and looked after by the Islands Council. Now, that's a model which we would love to promote right across Scotland.
I bet.
But I don't know if it's going to be possible. But on the other hand, we're also looking at the possibility where, in fact, we're beyond that. We are now at the latter stages of selling the building of Glasgow Cranhill to the Cranhill Development Trust, with the congregation being the major occupant and paying for the use of the space. Presbytership approvals required, and the trust is seeking funds from the Scottish Land Fund to be able to purchase the building. So the answer is yes, it is possible to do this. Presbytery is required. We need to think about ensuring that the price that is got for the building is the best possible price. We've been doing a number of deals with congregations where the Scottish Land Fund has come in to ensure that the money is available. So yes, this is an important point, that we don't need to have buildings we can actually operate without them.
Thank you. And finally, hopefully this time, before we can move on to the deliverance, John Ferguson. John.
Thank you, moderator. It was actually just in regard to Deliverance 1, but it was simply, it's not a question, but it was simply to express thanks to the General Trustees for their support in transferring the Kirk of St Nicholas in Aberdeen to their historic property portfolio. In the report at 2.52, this is highlighted. And we know this was not an easy decision for them, and that long-term solutions will need to be found. But the fact that they stepped in to ensure that this historic building can remain open for the time being is greatly appreciated by the Presbytery.
Thank you, John. Thank you. We now proceed to fast tracking. I have no request to speak on 1, 3, 4, or 6. I will pause briefly. There are still no requests to speak on 1, 3, 4 or 6. I therefore declare 1, 3, 4 and 6 passed. We move to section 2, and I do recall that we do need to finish this by 3:30 if possible. People should have their say, but if you can have your say concisely, please. So I now call on Gordon McRae to speak on section 2.
Moderator, I didn't regret to speak. Thank you.
That's even better, thank you. I therefore have no request to speak on section 2, but I must put it to a vote. All those in favour and all those against, please press your buttons. Voting is closed. They voted for 409 and against 0. Therefore, section 2 stands. We now move to new section 3, and can I invite Dr. Robin Hill to propose his new section?
Moderator Hill 79. All through the week, we've been reminded principally by our youth delegates yet again of the pressing need for both clear thinking and urgent and firm action on climate change and the related crises, which even now are emerging and causing such suffering across the globe, as we heard even this morning. The General Trustees are in a unique position in their ability to work with our church's buildings and grounds, often in conjunction with other agencies. And with this in mind, I am proposing, and Jim Jack is seconding, a new section 3 of the Deliverance, which has 4 subsections as in the print. Time is running out, and the Church of Scotland needs to be challenged at all levels to address the enormous issues which are involved here. If we're to do this, we will need definite targets to reach for and to attain, and subsection 4 seeks to address this. If we delay in this task, I fear that our commitment to God's creation and our witness to the world may be seen as being inadequate.
Thank you. I heard you say you had a seconder. I haven't seen a seconder come up on the screen, but seconded. Thank you very much. Any questions to Dr. Hill? Chairman?
Moderator, I've got a lot of sympathy with this, but I have a couple of problems at the same time. Yes, we are committing ourselves to the development of an updated energy and zero net policy. We've already done it as a General Assembly earlier this week, and at that point in time, we were happy to support the work that Faith Impact Forum has been doing, and in fact are working with them. Yes, to monitoring innovative energy-related projects. I have problems with us giving greater priority to promoting the work of eco-congregations. I'm happy to support and encourage the work of eco-congregations, but I think it's about marketing themselves there. We've already said that we have an energy consultant, and yes, that is in our report. His name is Andrew McCowan, and it's in the report. And fourthly, is the one that bothers me most at this point in time, to report to the General Assembly on establishing as a matter of urgency, which I agree, but it's the firm and realistic targets. It's the realistic targets for achieving carbon neutrality across the church. I can only deal with that in terms of buildings, and I can't even do it with buildings, because the responsibility for the day-to-day management is of the local congregation. And what we have to find is a way in which we can encourage local congregations to enter into this. As part of the work on the Presbytery Mission Act, we will be looking at what we understand as the sustainability of buildings through the process. We're also considering looking at individual buildings as a kind of selection to see what could he actually do to certain types of buildings that would actually enable us to reduce the carbon footprint of these buildings. So I wish I had had this earlier so we could have talked because it would have been good to have come to this assembly, because we only got this afternoon. It'd be good to have come to this assembly with an agreed position, which would enable us to say, yes, this is how we should proceed forward. So I'm afraid at the present moment, I'm going to resist it, but it's up to the assembly, obviously.
So when I invited the chairman to respond, I didn't have any name. It may just been a delay from Peter Donald to ask a question, but Peter, if you can keep it very quick, I'll allow you to ask the question.
Moderator, I'm happy to leave it. I mean, I certainly was offering to speak at this point, but I mean, yes, you called the convener. I think there's just a wee bit of a delay between registering and it coming through to you, but it wasn't world shattering, so yeah.
Thank you very much for your forbearance. We therefore must now move to a vote on section N3 and ask people to show for or against by pressing your respective buttons. Voting closed. There are voted for 165, against 294, so that is not passed. 3 and 4 have been fast-tracked. We now come to 5 and invite Scott Rennie to speak in relation to section 5. Scott.
Moderator 510, Scott Rennie. Moderator, it was just to I should declare an interest. I'm a recent board member on the General Trustees. I didn't want to let the report pass without saying on behalf of many of us, indeed all of us who are on the board and work with the General Trustees, indeed Raymond's leadership has been an inspiration. I was chatting with someone yesterday who said it used to be the General Trustees report was a chance to get a coffee in the Reigning Hall. Raymond's leadership, his vision, his drive has made that no longer a possibility. And as well as being visionary, he's also extremely collegiate, and we are all of us grateful for the leadership he's given. And I didn't want today's report to pass without someone actually saying it. We're also fortunate to look forward to Ian Townsend and Fiona Matheson coming in. Ian Townsend worked with us painstakingly in Aberdeen for our new plan, where we're going to realise by its end a 50% drop in buildings. And that was in large part due to his patient accompaniment and his ways of working with the Presbytery. So we're looking forward to the future, but I didn't want this moment to pass without us having an opportunity together to say a huge thanks to Raymond. Thank you, Moderator.
Thank you, Scott. Yes, thank you. But we must now move to vote on section 5. All those for and against, please press your buttons. Voting closed. There's voted for 432 and against 5, so section 5 stands. We'll now move to the new section to be proposed by the Reverend Mike Goss. Michael.
Thank you, Moderator. Mike Goss, number 491. It might be an unusual day in the Church of Scotland to find Mr. Rennie and myself very much on the same page on this, but we want to indeed express our gratitude for Mr. Young's vigorous and energetic chairing of the General Trustees, which has indeed been visionary and greatly appreciated, but also to express the gratitude of the Church for the 24 years of service that Dave Robertson has given through his work in various posts with the General Trustees. And I thought it would be appropriate for the Assembly to express this formally.
Seconder? Seconded. Any questions? There is no request. Paul, there is no request to speak on this. Can I call for votes for and against? Press your buttons now, please. Voting closed. There voted for 463 and against none. So that new section is duly carried. And I now call for the proposed new section in the name of Dr. John Ferguson. John.
Thank you, Moderator. John Ferguson, 504. Moderator, I speak as a member of the COVID-19 working group for the Church of Scotland, convened by the Principal Clerk. And obviously that's had a huge amount of work to do over these past 18 months or so. And during that time, I've been very much aware of the outstanding work undertaken by Mr. Brian Auld, the head of building safety. The report states that inquiries went up from 500 in 2019, over 6,000 last year, the vast majority relating to COVID-19. And Brian has coped with these inquiries with remarkable patience and fortitude. Sometimes it wasn't easy. Sometimes inquiries led to a lot of stress for him. And I think he's done a sterling job. And I think the Church owes him a debt of gratitude for the work that he's undertaken. I so move, Moderator.
And it has been seconded. Any questions? Any discussion?
Agree, Moderator.
Thank you very much. Thank you. And I must now put that Dr. Ferguson's proposed new section to vote. We press your buttons for and against. Voting closed. There is voted for 304 and against none. I therefore declare that new section carried. I must now put the deliverance as a whole as the will of the Assembly. Thank you very much. And Raymond, thank you very much. It's already been said in the course of these debates that you are standing down indeed as David Robertson. I think the Assembly owes you both a great debt of gratitude. You and I go back quite a long way. But over the years, you brought your skill, your energy and your knowledge to the work, not just of the General Trustees in recent times, but also to the Church as a whole, to involvement in the Iona community. We wish you and David every happiness in your retirement, so thank you very much indeed.